archive is one of a number of resources held by the museum that go some way to telling the Dornier story. Primarily it will give background, context and information about the wider picture in which you can place the individual aircraft. So this is a RAID plot chart. It shows the German activity over southeast England and up into the North Sea on the 14th of September 1940. So a bit later than the day on which the Dornier was shot down, but it does just go to show the confused and complicated nature of the air battle. Each of these tracks is a raid by the Germans that has been recorded and plotted by the RAF. And you can see how many there are, and also the way in which they don't follow straight lines. They're curved or jagged, and indeed some of them go back on themselves. So it really shows how complicated the air battle was over Britain. Here we have 3 combat reports relating to the specific combat in which the Dornier was shot down. They record the activity by 264 Squadron, and it's a composite of the activity for several individuals from that unit on one day. So as you can see, there's a narrative, and then at the bottom you have the results giving both our casualties and the enemy's casualties. The combat reports vary in their style and the brevity and also format. As you can see, there's a long one here, but then for the same combat we have 2 much shorter ones. Well, with regard to the day the Dornier 17 was shot down, these actually relate to that specific combat. Seeing the actual physical aircraft which these combat reports relate to is quite exciting. That's not normally a privilege you get to have. There are thousands of aircraft that were brought down, some in the sea, some in the land, but it's quite difficult to match them up, an actual physical example to the report that you've read about it. Here we have 2 brochures for the Dornier 17 aircraft produced by the Dornier company themselves to encourage sales of the airframe. This brochure here, it's an advert to sell the aircraft to other air forces around the world. So it gives you all the basic details about the aircraft and its performance and its armament and things like that. This is a sales brochure for the Dornier 17 for the bomber version, Kampfflugzeug. And you can see from some of the images just how narrow the fuselage was. Not much space in the cockpit. This is an example of the detailed reconnaissance that the Germans carried out along the English coast. You can see that this is a strip of coastline with an oblique photograph, and then above it a map showing you the view that you're seeing in the lower picture. This is to aid the Germans as they're crossing the coast to check their navigation so that they know where they are. These maps show how organised German intelligence was, that you have not only a photograph but you also have a map combined and produced into a booklet which can be examined by the Luftwaffe crews at their home bases so that they know what to look out for when crossing the coast and to try and pinpoint their position when they arrive. This is a volume of Air Ministry War Room daily summaries. Essentially, these are the newspapers which the high commanders of the Allied Air Forces would get to have with their bacon and eggs. It's basically a narrative, a short narrative, of all the activity that's gone on in all theatres in the air on the previous day or days. So the daily summary for the 27th of August, produced the day afterwards, doesn't mention specifically the loss of the Dornier. It's designed much more of an overview to give an idea that there were several raids on this day and that they were met by a number of forces and a general indication of how the raids went. So here we have 3 air publications, which is RAF terminology for manuals, relating to the Boulton Paul Defiant, the aircraft type which shot down the Dornier 17. Firstly, we have the pilot's notes, which, as the name implies, tell the pilot the limitations of the aircraft and how it should be flown. There's the technical and general information, which tell everybody how the systems work, how to repair it, that kind of thing. And then thirdly, we have details of the gun turrets designed by Boulton and Paul. The Boulton Paul Defiant, of course, having a gun turret at the back, and this gives you some information on what the turrets look like, so what it would have been like to be that gunner encased in that turret. In comparison to the documents we have for the Dornier, these are much more detailed and they serve a different purpose. They've come from the RAF rather than the German side, so as you might expect with the RAF Museum, we have a bit more information about the RAF aircraft. So this is a cutaway air diagram of the Dornier 17Z, the type which we recovered. It shows the construction of the aircraft, the crew positions, and also, critically, the fields of fire of the guns fitted to the aircraft. So this is intended for use by fighter crews so that they know what it is that they're coming up against and what it can do to fire back at them. You can see from the air diagram how narrow the fuselage is, and that's a facet of the fact that it was due to be a mail plane, not designed as a bomber, and it only has restricted space inside for the carriage of bombs. The historical importance of the archive changes when an event like this happens because it's much more immediate and specific. Before, it is still important, but there's a generality to it, whereas here you can link it to real individuals and an actual event.